Translate this and I'll marry you. Catherine Sterling's voice echoed through Sterling Tower's marble lobby. She waved a crumpled document at the black man kneeling in dirty mop water. At least then, you'd be worth something. Her European investors laughed from across the room. Her assistant covered her mouth, giggling. Hotel staff pretended to look away. Samuel Washington said nothing. He gathered scattered cleaning supplies with steady hands. Dirty water, soaking through his worn uniform. Catherine had kicked over his mop bucket moments earlier, sending gray liquid across the polished floor. The mess. Have you ever dismissed someone who held your future in their hands? 2 hours later, chaos erupted on the 42nd floor. Catherine Sterling stood at the head of her marble conference table, watching her billion-dollar dream crumble in real time. The European Alliance merger, 18 months of negotiations. Her company's future was dying in a storm of angry voices. Esto incept, the Spanish delegate slammed his folder shut. His face was red with frustration. The French representative shook her head, papers scattered before her. The German team leader adjusted his glasses, speaking rapid German to his colleagues. Their expressions grew darker with each word. Basta. We cannot proceed like this, the Italian CEO declared, pushing back from the table. Catherine's jaw clenched. 3 different translation services had worked on these contracts. Professional interpreters filled half the room, yet somehow everything was falling apart. Her CFO, Daniel Rodriguez, leaned close. The translations are technically correct, but something's wrong. They're talking past each other. Fix it, Catherine hissed. I don't care how. The Spanish delegate stood. Senora Sterling, with respect. This partnership cannot work if we cannot understand each other's true intentions. Catherine felt her empire slipping through her fingers. Sterling Industries had invested everything in this European expansion. Without it, they'd face bankruptcy within 18 months. Her phone buzzed with messages from board members. Stock prices were already dropping on rumors of the failed merger. Ladies and gentlemen, please. Catherine tried to regain control. We can resolve these misunderstandings. No, the Frenchwoman interrupted. These are not misunderstandings. These are fundamental disagreements about liability, profit sharing, and operational control. The German team was already packing their briefcases. The Italians whispered among themselves, clearly preparing to leave. Catherine had never felt so helpless. All her Harvard MBA training, all her years building Sterling Industries from nothing, and she was watching it collapse because of words. Outside the glass conference room, Samuel Washington emptied trash bins with quiet efficiency. His dark eyes tracked the heated gestures, the frustrated faces, the crumbling deal. He understood every word they were saying, and he knew exactly what was going wrong. Daniel Rodriguez needed air. The conference room felt like a pressure cooker, and had watched enough deals die to recognize the signs. He stepped into the hallway, loosening his tie. The merger was finished. 6 months from now, he'd be updating his resume. That's when he noticed the janitor had stopped working. Samuel Washington stood frozen beside his cleaning cart, head tilted toward the conference room's glass wall. His eyes moved like someone following a tennis match, tracking speakers as they switched between languages. Daniel watched, curious. Most people glazed over during multilingual arguments, but Samuel seemed engaged. Excuse me, Daniel approached carefully. Do you understand what they're saying there? Samuel looked up startled. For a moment, he seemed ready to apologize and move along. Then something shifted in his expression. They're not really fighting about money, Samuel said quietly. Daniel blinked. What? The Spanish team keeps saying compromiso, but your translators are rendering it as compromise. In Spanish business culture, compromise, dedication. They think you're asking them to settle for less than their best. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. Keep talking. The French representative uses benefits when discussing profit sharing, but she means mutual benefit, not just financial gain. Your interpreters are translating it as pure profit, making her sound greedy. And the Germans? Samuel glanced back at the conference room. They keep using Verantwortung, responsibility, but they mean personal accountability, moral duty. Your team thinks they're talking about liability insurance. Daniel stared at this man in a janitor's uniform, who had just decoded weeks of failed negotiations in 30 seconds. "How do you know all this?" "My mother cleaned offices in the International District. I grew up translating for our neighbors, legal documents, medical forms, business contracts." "You learned that words don't just have meanings, they have hearts." Through the glass, Catherine Sterling was gesturing frantically as the German team packed their briefcases. The Italian CEO, Daniel, pressed, "What's his real concern?" "He keeps saying familia family, but not blood families. He means his company culture, his employees. He thinks Sterling Industries sees his people as disposable assets, not partners." Daniel felt pieces clicking into place. Every translation had been technically accurate, but culturally blind. "Can you fix this?" he asked. Samuel hesitated. "I'm just the cleaning guy." "No," Daniel said firmly. "You're the only person in this building who understands what's actually happening in that room." The conference room door opened. Catherine's assistant emerged, her face pale. "They're walking out," she whispered to Daniel. "All of them. It's over." Daniel made a decision that would change everything. "Wait here," he told Samuel, then strode back into the chaos. Catherine looked up as he entered. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her blazer wrinkled from stress. "Daniel, if you have a miracle, now's the time." "Actually," Daniel said, "I think I do." The European delegates were already standing, shaking hands in polite farewell. 18 months of work dying in diplomatic courtesy. "Before you go," Daniel announced, "I'd like you to meet someone." Catherine frowned. "Daniel, this isn't the time for trust me." He opened the door and gestured to Samuel. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Samuel Washington. He has something important to say." Silence fell as Samuel entered, still wearing his cleaning uniform. The contrast was jarring. A janitor in a room full of executives in 1,000 suits. The Spanish delegate looked confused. The German team leader checked his watch impatiently. Catherine's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. She recognized him immediately. The man she had humiliated that morning. What was Daniel thinking? But Samuel walked to the center of the room with quiet confidence. "Señor Morales," he said to the Spanish delegate in perfect formal Spanish, "you are not being asked to compromise your principles. Señora Sterling values your commitment to excellence." The Spanish man's eyebrows shot up. Samuel turned to the French representative, switching languages seamlessly. "Madame Dubois, your vision of mutual benefit aligns perfectly with Sterling's values. There has been a misunderstanding." Then to the Germans in their own tongue, explaining concepts of shared responsibility and moral partnership. Finally to the Italian CEO, speaking warmly about family values and employee protection. The room was electric with stunned silence. Catherine Sterling stared at the man she dismissed as worthless that morning. He had just spoken 5 languages flawlessly, demonstrating a deeper understanding of international business than her entire translation team. That evening, Daniel found Samuel in the parking garage, loading cleaning supplies into a battered Honda Civic. "I need to understand," Daniel said. "Where did you learn to speak like that?" Samuel paused, a mop bucket halfway into his trunk. For a moment, he seemed to weigh whether this conversation was worth having. "My mother, Helen, came here from Jamaica when I was 5. He said finally spoke perfect English, but the world treated her like she was invisible because she cleaned offices." He continued loading supplies, his movements careful and practiced. "She worked nights at the International Business Center downtown. It'd do homework in empty conference rooms, listening to leftover conference calls, reading discarded contracts. That's how you learned. That's how I started. Our apartment building was full of immigrants, Mexican families, French students, German engineers laid off from the auto plants when they needed help with documents, legal forms, job applications." Samuel shrugged. "I was the kid who could bridge languages." Daniel watched this man who just saved $1 billion deal describe it like it was nothing special. "What about formal education?" Samuel's expression darkened slightly. "Full scholarship to University of Michigan linguistics program." He slammed the trunk shut. "Had to turn it down senior year when Mom had her stroke." The parking garage suddenly felt cold. She needed full-time care. I became the breadwinner. Cleaning jobs don't require degrees, but they pay enough to keep us afloat. That was 11 years ago. 11 years, 3 months, 2 weeks. Samuel leaned against his car. She's better now. Walks with a cane. Works part-time at a bookstore, but college ships sailed long ago. Daniel felt something twist in his chest. This man could have been running international corporations. Instead, he emptied trash cans because life demanded sacrifice. Is that why you do this? Does language work for neighbors? Samuel smiled for the first time all day. Every person I help cross a language barrier makes the world smaller, kinder. My mom taught me that dignity isn't about what job you do. It's about how you treat people while you're doing it. He opened his car door, then paused. Even people who kick over your mop bucket. The next morning, Catherine Sterling paced her corner office like a caged tiger. The European delegates had agreed to reconvene, but barely. One more miscommunication would kill the deal permanently. Daniel knocked and entered without waiting for permission. We need to talk about Samuel Washington. Catherine's jaw tightened. The janitor. Daniel. Yesterday was unusual, but we can't run a Fortune 500 company with cleaning staff. He saved the merger. He delayed the inevitable. Catherine turned to face the window, her reflection sharp in the glass. I've called in the best translation firm on the East Coast. Real professionals. Catherine, listen to me. No, you listen. She spun around, her voice cutting. What happened yesterday was embarrassing. A janitor correcting million-dollar translators. Do you know what the board would say? Daniel placed a tablet on her desk. The Spanish team called this morning. They want Samuel in today's session. Catherine stared at the screen. They what? Senor Morales specifically requested the young man who understands our true meaning. The Germans agreed. So did the French and Italians. The color drained from Catherine's face. This is insane. We have protocols, procedures, and reputations to maintain. Our reputation is in bankruptcy if this deal fails. Catherine sank into her leather chair. Through her window, she could see Samuel, 30 floors below, emptying trash bins in the plaza. From this height, he looked insignificant, forgettable. Fine, she said finally. One test. When he fails, and he will fail under real pressure, I don't want to hear about diversity initiatives for a month. 2 hours later, Samuel stood in the executive conference room, wearing the same uniform that had been soaked in mop water yesterday. The contrast was jarring, worn polyester among Italian silk suits. Catherine watched from the head of the table, arms crossed. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Washington will be assisting with our communications today. The edge in her voice was unmistakable. Several sterling executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. Senor Morales smiled warmly at Samuel. Samuel replied. Catherine felt a flicker of unease. That sounded too natural, too confident. The morning session began smoothly. Too smoothly. Samuel didn't just translate. He anticipated misunderstandings before they happened, clarified cultural contexts, and found common ground between conflicting positions. When the German team used betalong to describe profit sharing, Samuel explained to the others that they meant active participation, not passive investment. The French team nodded in understanding. When Madame Dubois mentioned engagement mutual, Samuel helped the Germans understand she meant collaborative partnership, not legal obligations. Catherine found herself leaning forward, despite her skepticism. This wasn't luck or beginner's fortune. This was mastery. During the lunch break, she cornered Daniel in the hallway. How is he doing this talent? Daniel said simply, impossible. Has a janitor. So was my grandfather. Spoke 4 languages. Ran numbers for 3 different neighborhoods. Never got past 8th grade. Being poor doesn't make you stupid, Catherine. She flinched at the rebuke. The Europeans trust him, Daniel continued, more than they trust us right now. We can either use that or we can watch our company die while protecting our precious protocols. Back in the conference room, Catherine studied Samuel as he facilitated a complex discussion about intellectual property rights. His voice was calm, authoritative. His eyes were sharp and focused. This morning, Shed expected him to crumble under pressure. Instead, She was watching him shine. The Sterling Industries boardroom felt like a courtroom at midnight. 5 executives sat around polished mahogany, their faces carved from stone. Catherine had barely sat down when the attacks began. "This is completely unprofessional," CFO William Hayes declared, his Boston accent sharp with disdain. "We're letting maintenance staff dictate billion-dollar negotiations." Chief Counsel Linda Winters leaned forward, her silver hair pulled into a severe bun. "Catherine, what happens when this gets out?" "Sterling Industries relies on janitors for international deals. The liability alone could destroy us. The Europeans specifically requested him," Catherine said carefully. "The Europeans don't understand our corporate structure," Hayes shot back. "We have protocols, hierarchies, and standards. What's next? Asking the cafeteria staff to run board meetings." Catherine felt the familiar weight of being the youngest CEO in the company's history. Every decision scrutinized, every innovation questioned. "The results speak for themselves," she argued. "Yesterday's session was our most productive in weeks. One lucky day doesn't justify throwing out decades of business practices," said Operations Director Edward Carter, his voice measured but firm. "What precedent does this set? Every employee thinks they can bypass their job description." The room's tension was suffocating. Catherine realized she was fighting a war on 2 fronts, saving the merger and defending her leadership. Meanwhile, 3 floors below, Samuel faced his own rebellion. "Man, you're playing your fire," Anthony Mendes warned as they restocked supply closets. Anthony had worked maintenance for 8 years. His weathered hands, proof of hard labor. "Rich people don't like being shown up, especially not by people like us," added Emily Park, the night shift supervisor. Her Korean accent was soft, but her concern was genuine. "I've seen this before. They use you, then throw you away when convenient." Samuel continued organizing cleaning supplies, his movements methodical. "What was I supposed to do? Let the deal fail?" "That ain't your problem," Anthony insisted. "Your problem is keeping this job, feeding your family, staying invisible. That's how we survive." "Surviving isn't living," Samuel replied quietly. Emily touched his shoulder. "Your mother raised you right, but good intentions don't protect you from bad people." Back in the boardroom, the assault intensified. "I spoke with the board," Hayes announced, his smile predatory. "They have serious concerns about our unconventional approaches." Catherine's stomach dropped. "You called an emergency board meeting without consulting me?" "I called friends who care about this company's future," Hayes corrected. "They want answers. What's your exit strategy when this experiment fails? How do we contain the damage to Sterling's reputation?" "And what about insurance?" Winters added. "If this janitor makes a mistake that costs us millions, who's liable? He has no professional credentials, no bonding, no accountability." Catherine felt the walls closing in. These people had worked under her father and had reluctantly accepted her leadership when he died. Now they sensed weakness. "Give me 48 hours, she said finally. 48 hours for what? To prove this works or to end it completely?" Hayes leaned back, satisfied. "Fair enough. But Catherine, understand, if this backfires, the board will demand changes." Starting with the management structure, the threat was clear. Her job was on the line. After the executives filed out, Catherine sat alone in the empty boardroom. Through the window, she could see Samuel in the plaza below, talking with other maintenance workers. He looked so small from this height, so ordinary. But yesterday, he had spoken 5 languages with the confidence of someone born to it. He had turned chaos into clarity with nothing but words and understanding. Catherine had built her entire career on recognizing talent and taking calculated risks. The question was, did she have the courage to bet everything on a janitor? By noon, word of the miracle janitor had spread through Sterling Tower like wildfire. Catherine found herself fielding calls from department heads she barely spoke to. Marketing wanted interviews. HR demanded policy clarifications. Legal insisted on liability reviews. But the real test came from an unexpected source. "Miss Sterling." Her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "The Japanese delegation from Yamamoto Electronics is here. They're having difficulties with their Korean partners." Catherine's stomach clenched. The Yamamoto deal was separate from the European merger, a smaller but crucial contract worth $50 million. If they lost both negotiations simultaneously, Sterling Industries would be finished. Send them to conference room B. Get our Korean translator immediately. Ma'am, he's not available. Food poisoning. Catherine closed her eyes. What about backup translators booked with other clients? There's a major trade summit downtown. Through her window, Catherine spotted Samuel refilling a maintenance cart. A crazy idea began forming. 20 minutes later, she stood outside conference room B, listening to raised voices in Japanese and Korean. The translation app on someone's phone was clearly failing, making things worse. Catherine found Daniel in the hallway. How desperate are we? She asked. Scale of 1 to 10? 15? She knocked on the conference room door and entered with Samuel behind her. The arguing stopped instantly. 6 executives in expensive suits stared at the woman in designer clothes, followed by a man in a janitor's uniform. Gentlemen, Catherine began carefully. This is Samuel Washington. He specializes in cross-cultural business communication. She held her breath. This was either brilliant or career suicide. Samuel stepped forward and bowed slightly to the Japanese delegation, then nodded respectfully to the Korean team. When he spoke, his Japanese was formal, respectful. Yamamoto-san, I understand there are concerns about manufacturing timelines and quality standards. The lead Japanese executive's eyebrows rose in surprise. Hi, but the Korean team seems unwilling to accommodate our specifications. Samuel turned to the Korean delegation, switching languages seamlessly. His Korean was less polished than his other languages, but clearly functional. Within 10 minutes, the real problem emerged. It wasn't about timelines or quality. It was about face saving. The Japanese team had designed specifications that were technically impossible to meet. Rather than admit this publicly, they'd made increasingly unreasonable demands, hoping the Koreans would back out and take the blame for the failed deal. The Korean team knew the specifications were impossible, but couldn't directly contradict their potential partners without appearing disrespectful. Both sides were tracked by cultural pride. Samuel navigated the situation like a diplomat. He suggested collaborative refinement of specifications, allowing the Japanese team to save face while giving the Koreans permission to propose practical alternatives. Perhaps, he said carefully in Japanese, Yamamoto's innovative designs could benefit from Korean manufacturing expertise to achieve optimal results. The Japanese executive smiled. Ah, yes, Korean precision could enhance our vision. In Korean, Samuel explained they want to partner with you to improve the original design. Your expertise is being requested, not your compliance. Catherine watched in amazement as tension melted into collaboration. Within an hour, both teams were sketching revised specifications together, laughing at shared solutions. As the meeting concluded with handshakes and exchanged business cards, the Japanese executive approached Catherine. Sterling, son, your consultant is remarkable. Where did you find such talent? Catherine glanced at Samuel, who was quietly organizing discarded papers. He found us. Back in her office, Catherine stared at her phone. 3 messages from Hayes about containing the situation. 2 from board members demanding explanations. 1 from her father's oldest friend asking if she'd lost her mind, but also confirmation that the Korean-Japanese deal was moving forward. The European merger is back on track. 2 potential clients requested meetings after hearing about Sterling's innovative approach to international business. Daniel knocked and entered. The Korean team wants to hire Samuel as a permanent consultant. What did you tell them? That they'd have to get in line. Catherine Sterling had never called an emergency board meeting at 900 p.m. before, but then again, she'd never bet her career on a janitor before. The mahogany conference table gleamed under harsh LED lights as 7 board members filed in. Their faces ranged from curious to hostile, with William Hayes leading the opposition. Catherine Chairman Richard Sterling, her uncle, settled into his chair with obvious reluctance. This better be good. We've had calls from competitors, journalists, and 3 major clients, asking about our personnel changes. Catherine stood at the head of the table, a stack of documents before her. Her hands were steady despite the storm in her chest. In the past 48 hours, Samuel Washington has facilitated 3 separate international negotiations, she began. The European merger is back on track. The Yamamoto-Korean partnership is moving forward, and this afternoon he prevented a $30 million lawsuit with our French suppliers. Hayes scoffed. Luck and novelty. It won't last. William's right, agreed board member Linda Winters. We're talking about sustainable business practices, not party tricks. Catherine opened her laptop. These are testimonials from every international partner we've worked with since Monday. She clicked play on the first video. Senior Morales from the Spanish delegation appeared on screen. Sterling Industries has found something remarkable. His voice filled the room. Not just translation, but true understanding. This young man speaks to our hearts, not just our languages. The next video showed the Japanese executive. In 30 years of international business, I have never seen such sophisticated cultural intelligence. Sterling's consultant understands what we mean, not just what we say. Hayes shifted uncomfortably as praise continued from German, French, Italian, and Korean partners. Impressive testimonials, Chairman Sterling admitted. But what about credentials? Insurance, professional liability already handled, Catherine replied smoothly. I've fast-tracked Samuel through our consultant certification program. Full bonding, professional development track, comprehensive benefits. She placed a contract on the table. Effective immediately, Samuel Washington is Director of Cross-Cultural Communications, reporting directly to me. The room exploded in whispers. Hayes leaned forward aggressively. Catherine, you can't just create executive positions for maintenance staff. The president alone. The president is identifying talent regardless of where we find it, Catherine interrupted. Isn't that what Dad always preached? Talent is our most valuable commodity. Chairman Sterling's expression softened slightly. His brother had indeed built Sterling Industries on those exact principles. What's his starting salary? Asked CFO Alice Wong, her calculator already out. $150,000 plus performance bonuses. Hayes nearly choked. You're paying janitor executive wages. I'm paying a director market rate for his position, Catherine corrected. His previous job title is irrelevant. Board member Dr. Sarah Carter spoke for the first time. What about employee morale? Other staff seeing a janitor leap directly to executive level. Catherine had anticipated this question. I'm also announcing the Sterling Talent Recognition Program. Any employee who demonstrates exceptional abilities can apply for accelerated advancement regardless of their current position. The room fell silent. This wasn't just about Samuel anymore. Catherine was proposing a fundamental shift in how Sterling Industries operated. Chairman Sterling stood slowly. All in favor of Catherine's proposal? 4 hands rose, including his own. Motion carried. Catherine felt her knees go weak with relief. She had just made Samuel Washington the highest-paid former janitor in corporate history. 3 days later, Catherine found Samuel on Sterling Tower's rooftop garden at sunset. He stood at the railing, city lights beginning to twinkle below, still wearing his cleaning uniform despite his new executive status. Haven't ordered your new wardrobe yet? She asked, approaching cautiously. Darris turned, surprised. Miss Sterling, I didn't expect to see you up here. It's Catherine, and I needed some air. She joined him at the railing, her designer heels clicking against concrete. Also, I wanted to apologize for what? Monday morning, the coffee, the papers, the things I said. She paused, watching traffic move like tiny lights far below. I was cruel. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. You were stressed. Important meeting. High stakes. People react differently under pressure. That's generous, but it doesn't excuse humiliating you in front of dozens of people. The evening breeze carried sounds of the city horns, sirens, the distant hum of millions of lives intersecting. Can I ask you something? Catherine said. When I kicked over your bucket, said those horrible things, why didn't you fight back? Samuel smiled slightly. My mother taught me that anger is like holding a hot coal. You only burn yourself. That's very philosophical for someone who just became the youngest executive in Sterling's history. Age and wisdom aren't the same thing. You're 29 and running a Fortune 500 company. I'm 30 and just figured out my life's direction. Catherine studied his profile in the fading light. Do you regret it? The path you took instead of college. Every day for 11 years, he admitted. But regret taught me something important. Every choice has a cost, but also a gift. My mother needed me, so I stayed. That choice led me to languages, to understanding different worlds, to this moment, to translate contracts instead of analyzing literature, to build bridges instead of writing about them. Catherine felt something shift in her chest. When had she stopped building bridges and started burning them? I have a confession, she said quietly. I've been thinking about you, not just professionally. The way you handled the board meeting, the Korean delegation, everything. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone grateful, submissive, someone who'd be happy to take orders and stay in their lane? She turned to face him fully. Instead, I found someone who makes me want to be better. Samuel met her eyes. Catherine, I need you to know I'm not interested in charity, or guilt, or whatever this is stemming from. It's not guilt, she said softly. It's recognition of who you really are. The city sparkled below them, full of infinite possibilities. The Sterling Tower boardroom had never felt smaller. At 6 a.m. on Friday, Catherine Sterling stood before the largest gathering of international executives in her company's history. 37 people, representing 14 countries. The European Alliance merger, plus 3 additional partnerships, worth $1.2 billion total. Everything she had worked for since taking over Sterling Industries 3 years ago hung on the next 4 hours, and it was all falling apart. This is unacceptable. German CEO Martin Mueller slammed his folder shut. We've been negotiating for 6 months, and now you present entirely new liability structures. The French delegation murmured angrily among themselves. The Spanish team looked ready to walk out. The Italians were already checking their phones for flight information. Catherine's hands trembled slightly as she gripped her presentation remote. Ladies and gentlemen, these amendments are necessary for regulatory compliance. Clients with what regulations? Demanded Madame Dubois, from France. Our legal teams found no such requirements in European law. William Hayes, Catherine's CFO, leaned close to her ear. The SEC identified 3 potential anti-rust issues late last night. We have to address them or face federal investigation. Catherine felt the room slipping away. 6 months of negotiations, 18 months of planning. And it might die because of last-minute government interference. Daniel Rodriguez sat in the corner watching Samuel take notes quietly. The man had been invaluable all week, but this was beyond translation. This was about saving Sterling Industries from extinction. Perhaps, Catherine said desperately. We could adjourn until Monday. No, Martin Mueller stood. We return to Germany today. This partnership is not viable. The Spanish delegation began packing. The French team followed suit. Catherine felt panic rising in her throat. Without this merger, Sterling Industries would face bankruptcy within 6 months. 2,000 employees would lose their jobs. Her father's legacy would crumble. In that moment of absolute desperation, she looked at Samuel. Their eyes met across the room. She saw calm confidence where she felt chaos, steady strength where she felt weakness. Without thinking, the words tumbled out. Samuel, if you can get this deal signed, I'll marry you. The room froze. 37 executives stared at her in shock. Catherine's face burned red. Had she really just said that out loud? In front of international partners and her own board? But something in Samuel's expression shifted. He stood slowly, adjusting his new suit, the first executive wardrobe head ever owned. May I suggest a different approach? He said calmly. Catherine nodded, too mortified to speak. Samuel walked to the center of the room. The real issue isn't liability structures or it's trust. He turned to the German delegation. Herr Mueller, your concern isn't legal liability. It's whether Sterling Industries will honor the spirit of our partnership when pressure mounts. You've seen American companies abandon European partners when government interference increases. Martin Mueller's expression softened slightly. Exactly, Señor Morales, Samuel continued in Spanish. Your team worries that new regulations will be used as excuses to renegotiate terms unfavorably later. See, precisely our concern. And Madame Dubois, your legal team sees these amendments as American arrogance imposing domestic concerns on international partnerships. Saint exact. She agreed. Samuel pulled out his phone and projected a document onto the room's main screen. I spent last night researching similar partnerships that survived regulatory challenges. The solution isn't more legal language, it's a commitment mechanism that protects everyone. The document showed a revolutionary partnership structure, shared legal liability, mutual regulatory support, and profit sharing that increased during government interference rather than decreased. If Sterling Industries faces SEC investigation, European partners share legal costs but also receive larger profit percentages. If European regulations target the partnership, Sterling absorbs compliance costs but gains operational control during transition periods. Catherine stared at the screen. This wasn't just translation or cultural mediation. This was sophisticated international law and business strategy. Where did you learn about corporate restructuring? She whispered. YouTube University and 11 years of reading discarded legal documents. Samuel replied quietly, then addressed the room again. This structure creates aligned incentives. Government interference makes the partnership stronger, not weaker. Legal challenges become shared opportunities, not individual burdens. The room buzzed with interest. Executives leaned forward, studying the proposal. Heinrich Mueller adjusted his glasses. This is innovative, but complex. Our legal teams would need weeks to review. I can walk through every clause in German legal terminology, Samuel offered, and explained comparable French, Spanish, and Italian precedents. For the next 2 hours, Samuel became the hub of the most complex international negotiation in Sterling's history. He didn't just translate languages, he translated legal concepts, cultural expectations, and business philosophies. When the Germans worried about Hoftong's Riso, he explained how shared liability actually reduced individual risk. When the French discussed mutual responsibility, he showed how mutual responsibility strengthened partnership bonds. Catherine watched in amazement as her impossible janitor turned executive transformed chaos into consensus. By noon, preliminary agreements were signed. By 2:00 p.m., legal teams were drafting final contracts. By 4:00 p.m., the largest international partnership in Sterling Industries' history was officially approved. As the European delegations celebrated with champagne, Martin Mueller approached Catherine. "Frey Sterling, your hair Washington is remarkable. Where did you find such talent?" Catherine glanced at Samuel, who was explaining regulatory nuances to the Spanish legal team. "He found us. I hope you appreciate what you have. In Germany, we would make him a managing partner immediately." "Don't give him any ideas," Catherine laughed. But her heart was pounding. As the executives filed out, exchanging business cards and making dinner plans, Catherine found herself alone with Samuel in the massive boardroom. The silence stretched between them. So Samuel said finally, his voice carefully neutral about that marriage proposal. Catherine's face went scarlet. "Samuel, that was the stress, the moment." "I didn't mean, I know exactly what you meant," he interrupted gently. "The question is, did you mean it?" She stared at him. This man who had just saved her company, her career, her life. 3 weeks ago, she had kicked over his mop bucket and told him he was worthless. Now he stood before her in a tailored suit, having just orchestrated the most complex business deal in Sterling's history. "I meant it," she whispered. The boardroom fell silent, except for the soft hum of air conditioning and distant city traffic. Catherine's words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. "I meant it," she had said. Samuel studied her face, searching for any hint of charity, pity, or corporate gratitude masquerading as genuine feeling. What he saw instead was vulnerability. Raw, honest, terrifying vulnerability. "Catherine," he said carefully, 3 weeks ago, you humiliated me in front of dozens of people. You called me worthless. You literally kicked over my mop bucket." She flinched as if he had slapped her. "I know, I was horrible. Let me finish. His voice remained gentle but firm. That morning, I was invisible to you. A uniform, not a person. What changed wasn't me. It was your perception. Catherine felt tears threatening. Everything changed. The way I see people. The way I see worth. The way I see the way you see me specifically, Samuel corrected. But what happens when the novelty wears off? When I'm just another executive attending boring meetings and filing quarterly reports? The question hit her like ice water. Was this infatuation, professional gratitude, or something deeper? I don't know, she admitted quietly. But I'd like to find out. Samuel walked to the window, his reflection merging with the city skyline beyond. My mother always said, the heart wants what the heart wants, but the mind should ask what the heart costs. What does your heart cost? He turned back to face her. Respect, partnership, the promise that I'll never be your project or your redemption story. I'm not interested in being the diversity hire who makes you feel enlightened. Catherine felt something crack open in her chest. Is that what you think this is? I think you're a good person who realized she made a terrible mistake. I think you're grateful that mistake didn't cost you everything. And I think gratitude can feel a lot like love when you're not used to being wrong. The brutal honesty should have stung. Instead, Catherine felt oddly relieved. This was exactly the directness she'd fallen for. The refusal to let her off easy, even about her own emotions. You're probably right, she said, about the gratitude, the guilt, all of it, but you're wrong about one thing. What's that? I didn't fall for Samuel Washington, the miracle translator who saved my company. She stepped closer. I fell for the man who stayed calm when I humiliated him, who spent 11 years sacrificing his dreams for his mother, who speaks 5 languages but has never used them to make anyone feel small. Samuel's careful composure flickered. I fell for someone who could have destroyed me with a sexual harassment complaint, a discrimination lawsuit, or a simple call to the press, Catherine continued. Instead, you quietly did your job and made my world better. Catherine, I'm not done. Her voice grew stronger. You asked, what happens when the novelty wears off? Here's my answer. I hope I get bored with how brilliantly you solve problems. I hope I take for granted how you make everyone around you feel heard. I hope the ordinary becomes extraordinary. The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Finally, Samuel smiled, the first completely unguarded expression shed seen from him. That, he said, is the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. Is that a yes? That's a let's start with dinner and see where it leads. Catherine laughed, relief flooding through her. I can work with that. But Samuel held up a hand on one condition. Name it. We do this right. Public relationship, company transparency, full board disclosure, no secrets, no shortcuts, no special treatment. I won't be your dirty little secret or your diversity trophy. Agreed. Catherine extended her hand formally. Partners. Samuel shook it. His calloused palm rough against her soft skin. Partners. The boardroom door burst open. Daniel Rodriguez rushed in, his face flushed with excitement. Catherine, the European teams want to celebrate. They're taking everyone to dinner at Leonarden. And he stopped, noticing their joined hands. Oh, should I come back later? Actually, Catherine said, not releasing Samuel's hand. Perfect timing, Daniel. I'd like you to be the first to know that Samuel and I are exploring a personal relationship. Daniel's eyebrows shot up. Exploring? Dating? Samuel clarified. We're going to try dating carefully, professionally, and with complete transparency. Daniel stared at them for a moment, then broke into a huge grin. About damn time. What's that supposed to mean? Catherine asked. I've been watching you two dance around each other for weeks. The way you light up when he walks into a room. The way he gets protective when board members criticize you. Stevie Wonder could have seen this coming. Catherine felt her cheeks burn. Were we that obvious? Only to everyone with functioning eyeballs. Daniel laughed. So, dinner celebration? The Europeans are expecting both of you. Catherine looked at Samuel. Want to make our first public appearance at a business dinner with 14 international executives? Sounds romantic, Samuel replied dryly. Actually, Catherine said slowly, it sounds perfect. Professional, public, Honest. Exactly what we just promised each other. 2 hours later, Leonard's private dining room buzzed with celebration. The largest international partnership in Sterling Industries history was officially signed, and champagne flowed freely. Catherine sat beside Samuel, acutely aware of every brush of his arm, every shared laugh, every moment their eyes met across conversations with European partners. Frost Sterling, Martin Mueller approached with his wine glass raised. I must toast your remarkable consultant. Without Herr Washington's brilliant restructuring, this partnership would have died. To Samuel, Senor Mamales agreed, raising his glass. The man who speaks our languages and our hearts. To Samuel, the room echoed. Catherine watched Samuel accept the praise with gracious humility, the same way he'd accepted her humiliation weeks ago, with dignity intact. As the evening wound down and European executives headed back to their hotels, Catherine found herself alone with Samuel on Lernadan's rooftop terrace. The city sparkled below them. Millions of lights reflecting their infinite possibilities. So, Samuel said, loosening his tie, how do you think that went? I think, Catherine replied, we just proved we can be professional partners and whatever this is at the same time. Whatever this is, Samuel repeated thoughtfully. I like that. No pressure, no expectations, just whatever this becomes. Catherine turned to face him fully. Samuel Washington, would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow? Just us. No Europeans, no business deals, no corporate politics. I would love that. Catherine Sterling. As they stood on that rooftop, the woman who had once called him worthless and the man who had proven her wrong began writing the first chapter of whatever this was. 18 months later, the Sterling Tower lobby looked exactly the same. Crystal chandeliers cast the same golden light across polished marble floors. Designer heels still clicked against stone as executives hurried to important meetings. But everything had changed. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sterling Industries' annual Talent Recognition Gala. Catherine Sterling's voice carried across the packed ballroom. She stood at the podium in an elegant navy gown, a subtle diamond engagement ring catching the light. 3 years ago, our company learned a hard lesson about hidden potential. Tonight, we celebrate what happens when talent meets opportunity, regardless of where we find it. The audience of 500 included employees, board members, international partners, and media representatives. But Catherine's eyes found one face in the crowd. Samuel Washington, now Chief Director of International Relations, wearing a perfectly fitted tuxedo and her grandmother's engagement ring on his left hand. Our first Sterling Talent Recognition Award goes to Laura Gonzalez, who began as a night cleaner and is now our head of Latino market development after we discovered she held an MBA from Universidad de Barcelona. Applause filled the room as Laura walked to the stage, tears streaming down her face. Our second award goes to Dr. Edward Carter, who worked in our cafeteria while completing his PhD in biochemistry. He now leads our new sustainable technology division. More applause, more tears, more transformed lives. Tonight, we've recognized 12 individuals who prove that potential doesn't wear a suit. It doesn't speak with an Ivy League accent. It doesn't announce itself with credentials or connections. Catherine paused, finding Samuel's eyes again. Talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. That changes today. She gestured to a banner behind her, the Sterling Foundation identifying hidden talent in every community. With initial funding of $50 million, the Sterling Foundation will provide education, training, and career pathways for overlooked talent in service industries across America. Because the next breakthrough innovation might come from the person cleaning your office, serving your coffee, or organizing your files. The audience rose in thunderous applause. As the formal program ended and guests moved to cocktail reception, Catherine found herself surrounded by congratulations and interview requests. But she kept searching for Samuel in the crowd. She found him on the hotel's rooftop garden, the same place they'd had their first real conversation months ago. Escaping your own party? She asked, joining him at the railing. Needed air and perspective. He gestured toward the city lights below. 2 years ago, I was emptying trash cans 30 floors down there. Tonight, I'm engaged to the CEO and announcing a foundation that could change millions of lives. Having second thoughts about the foundation? Never. About you. He turned to face her, his smile soft. Every day. And choosing you every day. Catherine felt her heart skip. Even after all this time, he could still surprise her with his honesty. For the record, she said, I still choose you too. Even when you leave your socks on the bathroom floor, we don't live together yet. Practice for the future. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe below them. Catherine, Samuel said quietly, do you remember what you said that first morning in the lobby? Her stomach clenched with old shame. I try not to. You said, translate this and I'll marry you. Like it was the most ridiculous thing in the world. It was cruel and stupid, and it was prophetic. He pulled her closer. You challenged me to translate something impossible. Turns out what needed translating wasn't words. It was worth it. Value potential. Catherine looked up at him. This man who had transformed not just her company, but her understanding of what it meant to truly see people. And the marriage part, she asked. Samuel smiled and dropped to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. Catherine Sterling, will you marry me for real this time? She stared at him in shock. Samuel, we're already engaged. You proposed 6 months ago. That was me asking. This is me making sure you still mean it. Through the rooftop garden's glass doors, she could see the gala continuing. Hundreds of people whose lives had been changed because one man had refused to stay invisible. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, I'll marry you again, always. As Samuel slipped the ring onto her finger, Catherine realized this was how real transformation happened. Not in grand gestures or corporate announcements, but in quiet moments when two people chose to see each other clearly. 3 months later, their wedding made headlines. CEO marries former janitor and corporate fairy tale. But the real story was simpler and more profound. True worth isn't worn on the outside, it's discovered on the inside. And sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with the most ordinary insult. Call to action. Look around you today. Who might you be underestimating? That janitor might speak 5 languages. Your server might be a brilliant engineer. Your delivery driver might have the solution you've been searching for. Like if you believe talent is everywhere. Share this story with someone who needs to remember their worth. Comment below, what hidden talent have you noticed in someone others overlook? Subscribe to Blacktail Stories for more stories about people who refuse to stay invisible. Remember, talent doesn't discriminate. Why should opportunity? What will you translate?